My beloved child, listen carefully, don't skip this message, because something inside your life is beginning to shift, and you may not understand it yet. You may have been asking why certain doors closed, why certain people disappeared, why a connection that once felt so close suddenly became distant, and why your heart has continued to hold on to a hope you couldn't completely explain. But tonight, imagine that heaven is reminding you of something simple. What is meant to bring peace into your life does not need to arrive through chaos. Your kindred soul may be closer to your story than you realize, not because a clock is literally counting down, but because you are entering a moment of clarity, courage, and emotional change. So stay with this message, because the next few moments may help you see your love story from an entirely different perspective. For a long time, you may have wondered whether you were imagining the connection. Maybe you felt something you couldn't put into words. Maybe there was someone whose presence stayed in your thoughts even when you tried to move on. You could go through an entire day without mentioning their name, and then suddenly a song would play, a memory would appear, or something small would remind you of them. You wondered why the feeling remained. You wondered whether it meant something or whether your heart simply hadn't finished processing the past. But sometimes a connection isn't important because it guarantees a particular person will return. Sometimes it is important because it teaches you something about yourself. Maybe your kindred soul entered your life to awaken a part of you that had been sleeping. Maybe they showed you how deeply you could care. Maybe they challenged your beliefs about love. Maybe they forced you to confront fears you had avoided for years. And maybe the greatest lesson wasn't about chasing them. It was about becoming the person you were always meant to become. Tonight, imagine a quiet room. The lights are low. The world outside has become silent. And somewhere, perhaps, another person is also thinking about their life. They may not know what you're feeling. They may not know you're listening to this message. But they could be standing at a crossroads of their own. They could be questioning choices they made. They could be remembering conversations. They could be wondering whether they were too distant, too afraid, or too late. Maybe they have been telling themselves that they should move forward. But something keeps bringing the memory of you back. Not because anyone is forcing them. Because unresolved emotions have a way of asking for attention. Maybe your kindred soul has been carrying a question. What if I had been honest? What if I had stayed? What if I had communicated instead of disappearing? What if the person I was afraid to lose was the person I should have appreciated? Those questions can become louder when the noise of life becomes quiet. And perhaps that's what is happening now. The distance between two people isn't always measured in miles. Sometimes it is measured in fear. Two people can be standing in the same room and feel worlds apart. Two people can live far away and still carry an emotional connection that hasn't been resolved. But when fear begins to disappear, distance can suddenly feel smaller. That is why this moment matters. Not because a magical timer is controlling your destiny. Because you may be reaching a point where you are finally ready to stop asking, "Why hasn't it happened yet?" And start asking, "What is this experience teaching me?" That question changes everything. Maybe you have spent months waiting for a sign. You looked at coincidences. You searched for meanings. You hoped for a message. But perhaps the most important sign is not something outside you. It's the peace growing inside you. You used to panic when they didn't respond. Now you can breathe. You used to feel like you needed an answer immediately. Now you understand that clarity takes time. You used to believe love meant holding on no matter what. Now you understand that love also means respecting yourself. That is growth. And perhaps your kindred soul is experiencing growth too. Maybe they are learning that silence isn't always strength. Sometimes silence is fear. Maybe they're learning that pride doesn't protect the heart. It isolates it. Maybe they're realizing that avoiding difficult conversations doesn't make problems disappear. It only delays them. And perhaps they are beginning to understand what your presence meant. Not because you chased them. Because your absence gave them room to notice what was missing. Maybe they expected time to make them forget. Instead, time helped them understand. Maybe they thought they wanted freedom from emotional responsibility. But eventually they discovered that freedom without connection can become loneliness. Maybe they thought they had moved on. Then something unexpected happened. A memory. A familiar place. A song. A photograph. A conversation. And suddenly, they felt that old emotion again. They asked themselves, "Why do I still care?" Maybe the answer wasn't complicated. Because some people leave an imprint. But an imprint is not a promise. It is simply evidence that something mattered. And perhaps your kindred soul is finally acknowledging that it mattered. Maybe they are beginning to look at the past without defending themselves. Instead of saying, "I had no choice," they are asking, "What could I have done differently?" That is maturity. That is the beginning of change. And maybe you are changing too. Perhaps you have stopped romanticizing the past. You can remember the beautiful moments without ignoring the painful ones. You can care about someone without abandoning your boundaries. You can hope without putting your entire life on pause. That is powerful. Because when you stop chasing an outcome, you become free enough to receive whatever is genuinely meant for you. Maybe that is why this moment feels different. Your heart isn't begging anymore. It is listening. And there is a huge difference. A heart that begs says, "Please choose me." A heart that listens says, "Show me what is real." That's where your power returns. Maybe your kindred soul is approaching a similar realization. They may have spent a long time thinking that returning to you would mean admitting they were wrong. But now they understand that admitting a mistake doesn't make someone weak. It makes them honest. Maybe they are rehearsing what they would say. "I know I hurt you. I know I disappeared. I know I didn't communicate. I know you deserved better." And perhaps the hardest sentence. "I was afraid. Not afraid of you. Afraid of what loving you would require from them." Because real love requires vulnerability. It requires accountability. It requires showing up when things become uncomfortable. Maybe they weren't ready for that before. But perhaps they are becoming ready now. Imagine them sitting alone and thinking about the future. They have two choices. Continue pretending nothing matters. Or finally acknowledge what their heart has been telling them. The first choice is easier for today. The second may be harder today but healthier tomorrow. And maybe they choose the second. Not because fate forced them. Because they finally understand themselves. Maybe they reach for their phone. They open your conversation. Their finger hovers over your name. They type. Hey. Delete. I've been thinking about you. Delete. I need to tell you something. Delete. They don't know how to begin. So they put the phone down. Then they realize something. The perfect message doesn't exist. Sometimes you simply have to be honest. So they pick up the phone again. And this time they write. Can we talk? That tiny message carries an enormous amount of courage. Because it isn't a promise. It isn't manipulation. It's an invitation. An invitation to communicate. Maybe you see it. Maybe your heart starts beating faster. But instead of immediately responding from emotion, you pause. You breathe. You remember everything you've learned. And you ask yourself, what do I actually want? That's important. Because this isn't only about their journey. It's about yours. Maybe you don't want the same thing anymore. Maybe you have changed. Maybe you need an apology. Maybe you need clarity. Maybe you need proof through actions. Maybe you want another chance. Maybe you don't. And all of those answers are valid. Spiritual growth doesn't mean ignoring your instincts. It means becoming honest enough to listen to them. Perhaps God isn't bringing someone closer so you can lose yourself again. Perhaps the purpose is to bring clarity closer. Maybe the person returns. Maybe the conversation happens. Maybe the relationship begins again in a healthier way. Or maybe you finally understand why the chapter needed to end. Either way, clarity is a blessing. And perhaps that's the deeper message behind the dramatic countdown. You don't need to race against time. You don't need to panic. You don't need to force destiny. What is healthy will not require you to destroy your peace. Maybe tonight is simply the moment you stop carrying tomorrow's anxiety. You release the need to know everything. You trust yourself enough to handle whatever comes next. And you allow life to unfold. Your kindred soul may be closer emotionally than they have been in months. They may be thinking about you. They may be reconsidering choices. They may be preparing to speak. But you don't have to chase those possibilities. Let reality reveal itself. Let their actions tell you whether their intentions are genuine. Because words can create hope. Actions create trust. Maybe they return with a beautiful speech. Listen. But then watch. Do they follow through? Do they communicate consistently? Do they respect your boundaries? Do they take responsibility? Do they make room for you? That's how you know whether something has truly changed. Maybe this time, the connection won't feel like constant uncertainty. It won't feel like guessing. It won't feel like waiting for a sign every 5 minutes. It will feel calmer. More grounded. More mature. And perhaps that is what you have been asking for without realizing it. Not simply someone who loves you. Someone who knows how to love you well. There is a difference. Someone can have strong feelings and still behave poorly. Someone can miss you and still not be ready. Someone can care about you and still need to grow. Love is important. But readiness matters too. Maybe your kindred soul is finally learning that. Maybe they realize that wanting you isn't enough. They need to become someone capable of building something healthy with you. And perhaps that is the transformation taking place. Not magic. Growth. Not obsession. Understanding. Not chasing. Choice. Maybe they are looking at their past and realizing how many times they let fear make decisions. They said no when they wanted to say yes. They stayed silent when they wanted to speak. They walked away when they wanted to stay. They acted indifferent when they were deeply affected. And now they don't want to repeat that pattern. Maybe they are finally saying, "If I care, I need to act like I care." That sentence can change a relationship. Because love that remains hidden forever eventually becomes regret. Maybe they don't want regret anymore. Maybe they want honesty. And perhaps you are ready for honesty too. Maybe you are no longer interested in dramatic promises. You want consistency. You want someone who can have difficult conversations. Someone who doesn't disappear. Someone who doesn't make you question your worth. Someone who can say, "I was wrong." Someone who can say, "I need help." Someone who can say, "I'm scared." Someone who can say, "I love you." And then live those words through their behavior. Maybe that is the kindred soul you are becoming ready to meet. Not necessarily the person you once imagined. The person capable of meeting you where you are now. Because sometimes we don't need a person to return. We need the right version of the relationship to return. And if that version cannot exist, you have the right to move forward. God's guidance doesn't have to mean a specific romantic outcome. It can mean wisdom, protection, discernment, strength, peace. Maybe the sign you've been waiting for is the ability to recognize what is healthy and what isn't. Maybe you are being guided away from confusion. Maybe you're being guided toward a love that doesn't make you beg for basic respect. Maybe your kindred soul is part of that journey. Maybe they grow enough to meet you. Maybe someone else does. But either way, you win when you stop abandoning yourself. And perhaps tonight you need to hear this. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. You don't have to compare your story to someone else's. Another person's relationship timeline doesn't determine yours. Your journey is your journey. And love doesn't become less meaningful simply because it took longer than expected. Maybe the waiting has taught you patience. Maybe the distance taught you self-respect. Maybe the heartbreak taught you boundaries. Maybe the uncertainty taught you to stop depending on other people for your sense of worth. Those lessons matter. And perhaps when love returns, you will be able to experience it differently. You won't lose yourself inside another person. You won't ignore red flags because you are afraid of losing them. You won't confuse anxiety with intuition. You won't mistake inconsistency for mystery. You'll recognize peace. And maybe your kindred soul will recognize it too. Imagine the moment you finally meet again. No dramatic music. No perfect speech. Just two people standing across from each other. You look into their eyes. They look into yours. And both of you realize how much has changed. They might say, "You look different." You smile. "So do you." They ask, "Is that a good thing?" You answer, "I think we're finally becoming honest." They smile. Maybe that's what we needed. Maybe there are tears. Maybe there is laughter. Maybe there is silence. But this silence isn't painful. It's peaceful. Because neither person is trying to run. Maybe they finally say, "I missed you." You don't rush to answer. You simply say, "I know." Then, "I missed you too." And perhaps that is enough. Not a promise of forever. A moment of truth. A beginning. Maybe you sit together and talk about everything. What happened? What hurt? What changed? What each of you wants now. And maybe for the first time, neither person is afraid of the conversation. That is what real progress looks like. Not fireworks. Communication. Not obsession. Peace. Not promises. Consistency. Maybe your kindred soul finally understands. You cannot ask someone to trust you while continuing to behave in ways that destroy trust. So they choose differently. They become patient. They become clear. They become accountable. They don't pressure you. They don't demand immediate forgiveness. They simply show up. And perhaps slowly, your heart begins to believe them. Not because someone told you to. Because their actions earned it. That is the kind of reunion worth having. A reunion built on growth. A reunion where both people can say, "We were different before. And we're different now." Maybe that is what this urgent moment is really about. Not 2 literal minutes. Not a countdown that determines your destiny. But a reminder that life is happening now. Your heart is changing now. Your choices matter now. Your healing matters now. And perhaps the person you care about is changing too. So don't spend every minute wondering when they will arrive. Become the person who is ready for healthy love whenever it arrives. Take care of yourself. Build your life. Laugh. Rest. Dream. Create. Heal. Because your life doesn't begin when someone chooses you. Your life is already happening. And the right person should add to it, not become the condition for you to enjoy it. Maybe your kindred soul is learning the same lesson. Maybe they are building their own life. Maybe they are healing their own wounds. Maybe they are becoming ready. And if your paths cross again, you will meet as 2 whole people rather than 2 wounded people asking each other to provide what they haven't learned to provide themselves. That is powerful. Maybe this is the real spiritual preparation. Not waiting. Becoming. Not chasing. Growing. Not demanding signs. Developing wisdom. Not asking, when will they come? But, who am I becoming while I wait? That question can transform everything. And perhaps the answer is someone stronger, someone calmer, someone wiser, someone who knows their worth, someone who can love deeply without losing themselves, someone who understands that a healthy relationship is a partnership, not a rescue mission. And when your kindred soul sees that version of you, perhaps they will realize something. The person they once knew has grown. And maybe they have grown too. Then the connection won't need to be forced. It will either naturally rebuild or naturally release. Both outcomes can be beautiful when they bring peace. Maybe you are being reminded tonight that love should not make you smaller. It should not make you constantly anxious. It should not make you feel like you must compete. It should not make you question whether you are enough. The right connection allows you to remain yourself. And perhaps that is what God is preparing you to understand. If someone comes closer, let them come with respect. If someone returns, let them return with accountability. If someone says they love you, let their actions confirm it. If someone wants another chance, let them earn trust. And if someone cannot do those things, have the courage to walk forward. Because your future is not dependent on one person's decision. Your future belongs to you. Maybe that is the strongest message of all. You don't need to fear the clock. You don't need to panic about being late. You don't need to chase the person who is meant to choose you. Healthy love does not require desperation. It requires mutual choice. Maybe tonight, your kindred soul is closer to making that choice. Maybe they are realizing what matters. Maybe they are preparing to communicate. Maybe they are finally ready to stop pretending. But let them demonstrate it. You don't have to carry the entire connection alone. Let them meet you halfway. And perhaps, if they do, you'll know. Not because of a mysterious sign. Because you will feel the difference between confusion and clarity. Between anxiety and peace. Between promises and consistency. Between fantasy and reality. That is the sign worth trusting. So breathe. Slow down. Put your hand over your heart if you need to. And remind yourself. I do not have to force what is meant to unfold naturally. I do not have to chase what chooses me freely. I do not have to lose myself to be loved. I am allowed to wait for something healthy. And if your kindred soul is truly meant to walk beside you, they will have their own work to do. Let them do it. You have yours. Maybe tonight is the night they finally understand. Maybe tomorrow is the day they reach out. Maybe next week brings a conversation you never expected. Or maybe the greatest miracle is that you wake up one morning and realize you are no longer afraid of whichever outcome comes. Because you trust yourself. You trust your growth. You trust your ability to recognize what is good for you. And perhaps that is when love finds its healthiest form. When you stop needing it to save you. When you stop needing it to prove your worth. When you can say, I want love. But also, I will not abandon myself for it. That is strength. That is maturity. That is the foundation of something beautiful. And maybe your kindred soul is approaching with that same understanding. Maybe they are no longer the person who left. Maybe you are no longer the person who waited. Maybe both of you have become different. And perhaps that's why the timing feels new. The past cannot be rewritten. But the future can be built differently. Maybe the next chapter begins with a simple message. Can we talk? And perhaps this time, you won't answer from fear. You'll answer from wisdom. Maybe you say, yes. But this time, you know your worth. You know your boundaries. You know what you need. And they know they must meet you there. No more guessing. No more games. No more pretending. Just truth. And if the connection is genuine, truth won't destroy it. Truth will strengthen it. So, my beloved child, don't let the urgency of this message make you anxious. Let it awaken you. Awaken your courage. Awaken your discernment. Awaken your hope. Awaken your understanding that love is not something you have to chase into existence. The right connection will require effort, yes. But it will also contain mutual effort. You will not be the only one reaching. You will not be the only one apologizing. You will not be the only one communicating. You will not be the only one fighting for clarity. Two people will choose. Two people will grow. Two people will show up. And perhaps your kindred soul is finally becoming ready for exactly that. Maybe the distance between you is shrinking. Maybe emotionally. Maybe through a conversation. Maybe through personal growth. Maybe through a decision. But whatever happens, don't forget yourself while waiting for someone else. Your story is bigger than a relationship. Your life is bigger than a soulmate. Your worth existed before they arrived. And it will remain whether they stay or go. If they return, let them meet the stronger version of you. If they don't, let your growth continue. Either way, you move forward. And perhaps that is why this moment feels so powerful. You are no longer standing at the mercy of someone else's choice. You are standing in your own life. You are choosing peace. You are choosing truth. You are choosing yourself. And from that place, love becomes a beautiful addition rather than a desperate necessity. Maybe your kindred soul will see that. Maybe they will realize, I don't want to lose this person. And perhaps they won't. But this time, they won't hold on to you through fear. They will hold on to the connection through honesty. They will communicate. They will show up. They will respect you. And they will let you choose them freely. That's the kind of love worth waiting for. So when you hear the final seconds of this message, don't think of them as a countdown to something supernatural. Think of them as a reminder. Every second matters. Every choice matters. Every moment you spend becoming healthier matters. Every boundary matters. Every honest conversation matters. And sometimes a life-changing moment doesn't arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives quietly. A message. A conversation. A realization. An apology. A decision. A peaceful morning. A heart that finally stops running. Maybe your kindred soul is approaching that moment. Maybe you are too. And perhaps when your paths meet again, you won't need anyone to tell you that something has changed. You'll know. Because there will be peace where there used to be confusion. There will be honesty where there used to be silence. There will be consistency where there used to be uncertainty. And there will be two people choosing each other freely. Maybe that's the miracle. Not that someone was magically sent into your life. But that two people became ready enough to build something real. So breathe one more time. Release the fear. Release the pressure. Release the need to know exactly when everything will happen. Your life is not running out of time. Your love story is not behind schedule. You are not forgotten. You are becoming. And whoever is meant to walk beside you must be willing to become too. Maybe your kindred soul is closer than you think. Maybe the next chapter is already beginning. Maybe the conversation you've been waiting for is slowly moving toward you. But let it arrive naturally. Let truth reveal itself. Let actions speak. And when love finally stands before you, don't ask only, "Is this the person I've been waiting for?" Ask, "Is this connection healthy? Is there respect? Is there honesty? Is there peace? Are we choosing each other freely?" If the answer is yes, then perhaps you can take the next step. One step. Then another. No rushing. No fear. No pretending. Just two hearts learning how to walk in the same direction. And if your kindred soul truly is coming closer, perhaps the most beautiful part isn't that they are approaching you. It's that you are finally ready to meet them without losing yourself. That is the transformation. That is the real countdown. Not 2 minutes. Not 11 seconds. Not tomorrow. Now. This moment. This breath. This choice to believe that you deserve a love that brings peace instead of constant uncertainty. And perhaps when you stop chasing the clock, you finally realize something beautiful. You were never late. You were being prepared. Prepared to recognize the difference between attention and love. Between chemistry and compatibility. Between longing and commitment. Between a temporary connection and a truly healthy partnership. Maybe your kindred soul is learning those lessons too. And if they come closer, let them come with truth. If they speak, listen. If they apologize, watch whether their actions change. If they ask for another chance, let time reveal whether they deserve it. And if they choose you, let them choose you completely. Not halfway. Not secretly. Not only when it is convenient. But openly, respectfully, and consistently. Then perhaps you will look back at this night and smile. Because you will realize that the urgent message wasn't telling you to panic. It was reminding you to wake up. Wake up to your worth. Wake up to your power. Wake up to the possibility of love without losing yourself. And perhaps the person you've been hoping for is waking up too. Maybe they are finally understanding what they lost. Maybe they are finally understanding what they want. Maybe they are finally understanding what love requires. And perhaps, when the moment arrives, they won't say, Wait for me. They will say. I've done the work. I'm here. If you still want to walk beside me, let's begin again, but this time, honestly. And you'll know exactly what to do. You won't need a sign. You won't need a countdown. You won't need anyone to convince you. You'll look at their actions. You'll listen to your heart. You'll honor your wisdom. And you'll choose what brings you peace. Because that is the ending you deserve. Not an ending controlled by fear. Not an ending controlled by urgency. A beginning built on truth. And perhaps tonight, somewhere between the silence of the past and the possibility of tomorrow, your kindred soul is finally taking that first brave step toward becoming someone capable of meeting you there. So don't chase. Don't panic. Don't lose yourself. Stay grounded. Stay open. Stay wise. And let the truth reveal itself. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't that someone comes closer. It's that when they finally do, you are strong enough to recognize whether they came to stay. And if they did, my beloved child, then perhaps this is not the end of the waiting. Perhaps this is the beginning of the choosing. Two people. One honest conversation. A new chapter. And a love that no longer needs to hide behind fear. The clock can stop. The pressure can disappear. The past can finally rest. Because what matters now is not how long you waited. What matters is what you build from this moment forward. And if your kindred soul truly belongs in that future, they won't need to be chased into it. They will walk there beside you. Freely. Honestly. Peacefully. And together, you may discover that the most beautiful love story was never about waiting for someone to save you. It was about two people becoming whole enough to choose each other without fear. That is where the real miracle begins. And that is where your next chapter can finally open.